On Monday, the Supreme Court tossed out another case from several Republicans in, I don't know where they were, but it had to do with challenging the changes to election rules in Pennsylvania. This shit's still going on. So for the 67th, 112th, 5,000th time, this corrupt, filthy, fascistic Supreme Court just decided not to take up the case of these Christian fascists. It was an unsigned ruling, and it sends yet another message that the court's majority has no interest in relitigating this last election. They have other business to get about, other fascistic shit to focus their attention on. Trump served his purpose. He put 3 of these scum on the Supreme Court. They have no use for Trump. These are lifetime appointments. They don't give a shit. These new Supreme Court justices and the 3 conservatives who are already there. So we now have a 6-3 fascistic Supreme Court. But the 3 that Trump appointed and that Mitch McConnell rammed through, they don't give a fuck about Donald Trump. Get out of town, dude. So they decided not to hear, yet again, another challenge to some aspect of the 2020 presidential election. CNN Supreme Court analyst, who's also a professor at University of Texas School of Law, Stephen Bladek, he said, quote, "Once again, the court's involvement in the 2020 election is going out with a whimper, not a bang." There were, I think I mentioned, there were no noted dissents to this decision by the Supreme Court to just say, please, we have business to do, go away. The case was brought by a former Republican congressional candidate. These people have more balls than a brass monkey. I swear to God. His name is Jim Bognet, and 4 individual voters who argued that Pennsylvania's high court exceeded its authority when it ordered the expansion of ballot deadlines during the pandemic. Oh, right. So, therefore, all the millions of votes in Pennsylvania should be thrown in the gutter. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, now their argument, or the argument, goes that the Constitution of the U.S. gives the state legislature, not the governor or state courts, the final word on elections and the manner in which states choose their electors. Critics of the so-called independent state legislature doctrine says that legislature is a broad term, including commissions given legislative power by the state constitution, blah, 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 blah. I get lost in this. I get a headache. I don't even want to get into it. Biden won Pennsylvania by roughly 82,000 votes. That's all we really need to know. So let me put this in the Oval file. Hold on. Yeah, there we go. The Supreme Court yesterday also ruled this ruling. This was a ruling, not a rejection. It was a 6-3 ruling, and you can guess who the 6 were. These son of a bitches. They ruled that judges don't have to determine that juvenile offenders are beyond hope of rehabilitation before sentencing them to die in prison. Now, what I mean by that, prior to this ruling, there have been several court cases that say juvenile offenders, say someone 14, 15, 16, who in a fit of rage, teenage rage, whatever you want to call it, kills somebody. Up to this point, up to the ruling yesterday, a judge could determine at trial, whether or on conviction, whether or not that juvenile was salvageable. And based on that, And that would be based on or pre-sentencing reports and so on and so forth. But based on that, the judge could sentence this 15-year-old, okay, son, 20 years in the slam, but you will get out eventually. Judges had that discretion because of 2 or 3 court cases, Supreme Court decisions over the past several years. But no longer, it's an end. What these son of a bitches on the Supreme Court said, if a 15-year-old is convicted of murder, capital murder, and if the state maximum is life without parole, then the judge can sentence that kid to life without parole. This is staggering. Brett Kavanaugh, the drunk, so-called justice of the Supreme Court, the alcoholic fuckhead, writing for the majority in the 6-3 ruling, said it was enough that the sentencing judge exercises discretion rather than automatically imposing a sentence of life without parole. In other words, what the drunk is trying to say, well, as long as the judge considers life without parole as a viable option, then the judge can go ahead and sentence the 15-year-old to life without parole. What a weaselly bastard. Kavanaugh, the drunk, wrote, in a quote, in a case involving an individual who was under 18 when he or she committed a homicide, a state's discretionary sentencing system is both constitutionally necessary and constitutionally sufficient. So what the drunk is saying here was, yeah, well, if your state constitution says somebody can be sentenced to life without parole, and the somebody in a particular case is 14, 15, 16, fuck them, sentence them. Put them away for the next 70 years, 60 years. Go ahead. Who gives a shit anymore, right? The ruling had no specific finding concerning the person being sentenced, the defendant's level of maturity. Well, did he or she fully understand the charges against them? Did they understand what they were doing when they did it? None of that's considered anymore. Or what also is not considered is whether or not the teenager standing there has the capacity for change. No longer. Fuck it, the drunk said. Doesn't matter anymore. Sentence the little shit. Sentence him life without parole. If your state constitution allows it, go for it. Little bastard shouldn't be on the street anyway. Besides, he's probably going to be some colored kid, so who cares? The ruling also drew a caustic dissent from Justice Sotomayor, who accused the majority, the 6 fascists, of gutting the 2 major precedents that I just mentioned. Now, just a little background, because we need to know this shit. Over the past 16 years, the Supreme Court, and often it was led by Justice Kennedy, methodically limited the availability of these incredibly harsh penalties for crimes committed by kids, by juveniles. First, they struck down the juvenile death penalty, and then the Supreme Court, when it was a little more sane, restricted sentences of life without the possibility of parole. But Kennedy's not there anymore. He retired in 2018. And the court is now dominated by these 6 fascists, these Christian fascists, every fucking one of them. There's not a Jew in there. There's not a Muslim. There's not a Buddhist. These are Christian fascists, all 6 of them. And the Christian fascists are not the least bit interested in continuing Justice Anthony Kennedy's project. It was labeled as such because he was one of the leaders in some kind of even a close approximation to rational rulings. If you have a 16-year-old who committed a murder, yes, horrifying. Horrifying. And the kid is going to be locked up. But life without parole? Doesn't that constitute cruel and unusual punishment? Isn't that prohibited by the U.S. Constitution? But you see, the U.S. Constitution, George Bush said it a number of years ago, it's a goddamn piece of paper, quote, unquote, George Bush. It's a goddamn piece of paper. Yeah. Now, this decision yesterday concerned a young person named Brett Jones, who had recently turned 15 in 2004. This is an old case. He was 15, just turned 15, 2004. His grandfather discovered his girlfriend in the boy's room. So the 15-year-old and grandpa argued and fought. And the kid, who had been in the kitchen making a sandwich, lost his shit, stabbed his grandfather 8 times, killing him. Horrible, horrible crime, no question. And then a year later, Brett Jones, the kid, was convicted of murder and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, which was, at the time, the mandatory penalty under state law in Mississippi. Oh, well, no surprise there. That same year, 2005, the Supreme Court ruled in a case that the death penalty for juvenile offenders was unconstitutional. And then in 2012, in a case entitled Miller versus Alabama, Mississippi, Alabama, you get it. The court extended the logic of that decision in 2005 to ban mandatory life without parole sentences like the one imposed on this 15-year-old. And that decision repeatedly criticized these mandatory sentences. And the suggestion in the ruling was that the only ones in which judges could take account of the defendant's age were permissible. In other words, it left the discretion up to the judge. Okay, you have a 15-year-old standing in front of you. He was convicted of murder. We don't know the extenuating circumstances. We don't know the context. We don't know anything. I'm sure they knew it in the sentencing court and in the Supreme Court or the appeals court as it worked its way to the Supreme Court. But what we did know, you and I, even though we've never heard of these cases before until this moment, what we do know, though, is that sentencing a 15-year-old to life without the possibility of parole is bullshit. It's horrifying. It's medieval. Why not just take the kid out and lop his fucking head off? Wouldn't that be less torturous? God damn, this country is just going right in the shitter. I mean, we really are with this Christian fascist insanity. Look what Donald Trump did to the Supreme Court. Look what the son of a bitch did to our electoral system. Look what the son of a bitch has done to the former Republican Party, which is now dead, and having given rise to the Christian fascists. There's your resurrection for you. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.